are and what are your expectations for today's class. So welcome once more, and you guys are amazing and awesome. Let me just read the chat. Initially, I think I'll try and make sure that we have a seamless session, but my colleague that was supposed to assist in admitting people in is currently not available, and the link was created with my mail, so I will be the one also admitting people in and also trying to um, anchor the class. So I know that God will help me, and it's going to be a seamless session. This is not the first time that we're having a session like this. So basically, we've not started. I'm just trying to keep you guys' mind at rest and prepare your minds for what is to come. I can't see any message in the chat. The chat is open. You can drop your message. How are you feeling? You can tell us about your day. I had a wonderful day, and in the afternoon it was seeming to rain. It actually rained heavily here in Abuja, and I was so surprised that it's when I want to have like a session, that's when rain is falling. So it means that it's rain of blessing. I have 9 persons here. You can just send hi on the chat so I know that you can hear me before we kickstart the meeting. Yeah. This one's okay. Leave it. Thank you. Yeah. Hi, Naftali and Okoro Success. Where are you guys joining from? I would love to know. I am currently in Abuja. Do I have anyone in Abuja here? Wow, I can see someone from Uganda. Wow, Williams. Yeah, that's William. Thanks for joining in. I've never been to Uganda though, but I think maybe I'll go and see William in Uganda. That's awesome. Yeah, Jace Joba from Oyo State. Welcome on board, and thanks for joining in early. That was the second person that joined in today. I can see, wow, my personal person from Port Harcourt, that's Okoro Success. I also reside at Port Harcourt, but currently I'm in Abuja. Thanks for joining in. Who else can I see? We're just trying to stall before we start the session, wait for others to join. Yeah, I can see Olaito Motayo joining in from Abidjan. I don't know where it's Abidjan though, but maybe I'll check my Google map. Maybe I would like to be there someday. Shola Akinsanya, yeah, Abdul from Lagos. Welcome everyone. You guys are amazing, you guys are awesome, and you guys are really doing well. So we have just few minutes to stall. We have less than 1 minute before we start the session. Welcome. Yeah, what are you guys' expectation? How's the weather over there in Uganda, in Oyo, and in Port Harcourt? I actually love Port Harcourt because I stayed in Port Harcourt for over 5 years, and yeah, Port Harcourt people are great and awesome. Wow, someone is joining in from Ivory Coast. That's amazing. Okay, Abidjan is in Ivory Coast. Well, I don't know a lot of countries, but I'm so like super excited to meet you. Thanks for joining in, and I know that this will have like an amazing session together. You guys are amazing. Like someone joining from Ivory Coast. Here in Nigeria, Abuja, the weather is a little bit cloudy. It rained in the afternoon, and the time over here is 7:10 sharp. Yeah, that's awesome. So we're getting started in a minute. All right. Okay, so before I get started, I'll just give some lay down rules for those that would want to ask question at the end. It's going to be very possible for you guys, and all you need to do is to raise a hand, and request to speak, and I'll grant you access, and you ask your questions relating to creating components and also UI UX design in general. So your questions, we are accumulating a lot of questions. Okay, the time difference here is 1 hour. We are 6:10 p.m. here. Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. Alaiton, thanks for joining in, and I really respect you and I respect your time too. Okay, let me check other people who else joined in early. I have a lot of people here though. Okay. Okpatola Nathaniel. I think you are joining in from Zaria, Kaduna. Okay. Yeah, amazing. Thanks for joining early. Please, I need to confirm, is there any background noise? Because I want us to have a seamless session. I try as much as possible to filter the meeting and my environment also, so as we have a wonderful session, and I hope I'm audible enough. Okay, a little bit of noise, Naphtali. Okay, yes sir, there's a little bit background noise. Hope it's not disturbing. I don't know, there's no light over here. I had to put on my gen, so maybe that's like the actual noise we're hearing, but I think everything is calm all the way because my voice should overshadow the noise, right? Sorry, is the noise so disturbing? So I can look for a way around it. We are still trying to stall though. I need more people to join. Let me take a sip of water. Okay, hope the noise is not disturbing though. We'll have to like make do with what we have now. I'm in Abuja. I'm not currently in so I came to visit my uncle here in Abuja basically, so that's why I have to make do with what I have here. I'm not in my workspace, but I'm very much I am assuring you guys that we'll have like a seamless session. Okay, we'll be starting in 3, 2, 1, go. Good evening everyone, and welcome to Famous KDev Academy, an educational platform that helps to inspire, educate, and also connect UI UX designers around the world. And I am Lawal Oluwafemi John, also known as Famous KDev, and I'm the founder of Famous KDev Academy. And God's so good, I'm also a product designer, just like you guys, or a UI UX designer, as some will know it as. And I'm so happy and super excited to have you guys here. So today, our topic of discussion today, that's why a lot of you guys are here, right? We want to learn how to create components in Figma. Components are amazing, they are awesome, and they make life easy. Components are just like AI, right? They are like artificial intelligence in product design, and in Figma, components are so amazing. And I'll be your tutor for today's session, and I trust that we'll have a seamless one. So yeah, so let's get started. So we have like a project, a course outline. So over the course of the class, we'll be discussing introduction to components, talking about styles, states, and sizes, and also creating smart button components, and also a question and answer session, and also introducing something huge to us. For those that are in Nigeria, would understand when I say something huge, right? It's actually a amazing word that we use here, right? So something huge is actually going to be announced after today's session. So without wasting much of our time, let's get started. Now, what are components? Components in Figma are reusable UI elements that can be shared and used to create consistent and efficient designs across multiple screens and projects. Now, talking about components, I see components as templates that you can use. That's predefined templates that you can use, that you can just pick and insert into your designs easily, and you can also customize them based on your own preference. So I mentioned earlier that what components makes our life easy, and as a designer, as a product designer, you ought to know how to use components, because before now there was no components in Figma. So Figma was like, wow, what's happening? Why can't we like reuse elements? We created a button, we can't reuse them. um, it also brought React. For those that are developers in the house, I don't know if you're a developer, you can let us know in the chat. If you are so familiar with React, right, you know that React deals with a lot of components, and it's almost similar to the way that Figma works, right? Figma components are so similar to what, to React components. That's why as when a developer and designer are collaborating, they collaborate seamlessly when the developer is using React framework and the designer is actually using Figma, or maybe using other design tools like Sketch, Adobe XD, and others. So yeah, going forward, let's go to the next slide. Why use components, right? Why are components so important? Now, components are important because of a whole lot of reasons, but these are like the basic reasons why components are important. I mentioned earlier that components are like templates. Now, if you understand what templates are, right, templates are just elements that you just pick and you use immediately, right? So we want to see our designs. We want to create designs that are scalable. We want to create designs that are efficient. We want to create designs that are what, that are effective, and we need to what, inculcate what, the usage of components. Now, reusing elements is very, very important. Imagine you have a, let's say, a single t-shirt, right, that you can wear all through your lifetime. No one will want to do that, right? The t-shirt will tend to fade and it's going to spoil. But when it comes to components, nothing happens to the component. The component is always what, evergreen. It's always there for you to use. So you just have to create a single component, and you keep on duplicating it, copying it, using it, and you can use one single button for a full product. Now, when I say I'm referring to product, I'm referring to something like maybe your WhatsApp. For those that are familiar with WhatsApp, you can use just a single button for what, for your Facebook. So just a single button component can be used on one platform. And also consistency. Now, building consistency around your product is very important. As a designer, you want to make sure that what, that your users get familiar with your platform. They don't want to feel like we are like mingling between WhatsApp and Facebook. When you're on WhatsApp, the experience on WhatsApp is quite different from that on what, on Facebook, because of the elements that are being used. And also we have maintainability, right? Building a robust system, a robust product like maybe WhatsApp, Shopify, we have Spotify, right? You understand that you have to create something that what, that you can maintain. You don't want to keep creating buttons upon buttons upon buttons. You want to just create a single button and use it all through your design. And also for collaboration, I explained using React, right? Developers will love you if you use components. Ever since I started learning about design systems that's trying to like create an effective and efficient platform, most of the developers that I have worked with, they tend to what, to love me for my designs. They'll be like, wow, I like the way you structure your designs. I received a compliment from a developer who he was like, wow, I've never met any designer like you. I was like, why? Everyone do the same thing. Like, he said, I know that your designs are so structured, you make use of components. I just have to pick a single component and use it on my React framework. And we had a seamless session basically. Without wasting much of our time, let's go to the next slide. Now, when we are talking about components, right, we ought to understand that what, that the main component is the only component we have to create. It's the one that we give the properties to, we add colors, and we do all our UI, right? Add styles, add borders, and the likes. So let me show us a brief example of a main component. Sorry, give me a minute. This should be the actual, yeah. So these are what types of components, right? We have several types of components. Components can be anything. It can be your icon, it can be your input, it can be what your checkbox. So these are like some of the components I have on inside my design system. I actually have a design system that was built by me, and I use them on different projects. Sorry, can you guys still hear me? I need to get that feedback. Are we having a seamless session? Yeah, I'll do that. I'll share this slide after the class. I'll do that. I'll share it on the community for those that are on the community. So yeah, so going forward, I was explaining what the main component, right? A main component defines the properties of the component. Now, just to give you a brief of insight, right, a better insight into things, this is a single component, a button component, right? If I have this component, if I've created this singular component now, I can use it all through my designs. The only thing I need to do is to keep duplicating it, and if I copy this component, right, and place it here, now it means that I've created an instance of that component, which brings us to what? To instance. Instance what is a copy of the component you can reuse in your designs. So now I wouldn't want to use my main component in my product. What I would want to use are the instances of that component. So the only thing you have to do, we're going to do this practically here. I'm going to create different button types and states, and we'll also use them on one of the products that I have for us. So yeah, so components can be anything. It's not just limited to buttons. It can be icons. As you can see, I have different icons here, some basic icons that we can use, arrow icons. I have input fields. These are an instance from my design system. I also have checkbox, right? Can you see the different checkbox that we have? And this brings us to what? To this brings us to what? To components property. So your components can have several properties, right? Because Figma keep on adding a lot of features to make the experience better. They are looking for easier way for us to create better products. So that's why they have to as at yesterday, Figma actually made an update on their prototype, right? That's as at last week, I guess. They created a feature that's the state management system, right? So Figma keeps on adding more features for us, for designers to create a robust and efficient system. So component properties, these are the changeable aspects of a component. They help us minimize the amount of variance. So let's go back to our design workspace, and let me pick a single component now. Now this is a button component from my design system. If you can see here right now, I have a whole lot of properties here. If you can see my mouse hovering, you can see I have I can change this button to the type of button to an applied button. I can change it to a field button, to a text button. I can also change it to a loader button. I can also change it back to my field. Can you see the different states? So these are all properties. I can toggle on and on my icon. I can toggle on and on my right icon and also the left icon. So we are going to create this in today's class. I'm just trying to give us a brief overview of what we'll be doing. Let's go back to our slide. So there are different types of properties. We have the variance property, the text property, the boolean property. The boolean property deals with changes, right? And it respects either maybe yes or no. It's actually an amazing property, right? Just a click and you are able to tweak your components. And we also have one of the newest features of Figma. That's the swap instance property, and also the expose nested instances property. So these are like some of the properties that we're going to be using to create our button components. Next slide. So I talked about so variants, right? Variants allow you to group and organize similar components into a single container. This simplifies your component library and makes it easier to find. Now, to give us more insights about variants, right? This is our checkbox. This is a checkbox component, right? This is a checkbox component. Now, the reason why I can switch, let me create an instance from it. I'm holding Alt on my keyboard. I'm actually using a PC. For those that are using a Mac, I think that should be your command key. Yeah. So I'm using a PC here. I hold Alt and I have created an instance of my checkbox components here. Now you can see that on the properties here, I can change between different variants. So these are the variants that have been created here, right? So variants are what a group of related components that makes you to want to switch between different states of your components. For those that are familiar with design systems, if you have heard about design systems before now, right, you would understand that a design system or a style guide, right, or or a pattern library, as some will know it as, it combines a lot of components together. I will show you guys my design system. That's a mini design system that I created just to use on products that I work on, right? So let's dive deeper into, because this is a practical session. This is not supposed to be a kind of tutorial session, right? It's more of practice. So I want to show you guys how I create my own buttons and how I create other components in Figma. So now let's get started. Can you guys hear me? Is there anyone with me? So far, what have you learned so far before we start creating components? Yeah. Okay, you can hear me. That's awesome. That's awesome. That's amazing. I want to see you guys in the chat. Yeah, let me just take a sip of my water here. Okay, so let's dive into it. Let's create our first button. Sorry, give me a minute there. I hope the background noise is not disturbing us, right? So we'll just try and bear with it, and we'll have a seamless session. Sorry. Okay, so let's get started. So creating a button, right, you have to understand the structure of a button, which brings us to the anatomy of a button, right? What are the elements that are in a button? You have to ask yourself. So the first thing that we have in a button is the text element, right? So we have a text. So I'm going to click on T on my keyboard, or I used my nav bar here, right? And I select the text element. So I click this. Let me type in the name of my button. So I want my button to be what? To be named the button. Then the next thing I'm going to do is to add, let me change this font to a font that everyone knows. Let me use Inter. That's the regular font that everyone have access to. My brand font is actually Tomato Grotex. In case you need that information, you can download that. It's actually a premium font, so for those that have access to that, you can get that if you want to. So let's use Inter for this. So I'm going to change the font weight to medium, and we'll get started. So the first thing, anatomy of a button, the first thing that you have to type in is your text, right, which represents the name of your button. This is your actual call to action. This is the word that you will see on your button for you to trigger a function, right? Because one of the major functionalities of a button, they are used to what, as triggers, right? You use there are different types of button. Basically, we don't want to dive deeper into that. You have buy button, depending on your city, right? Depending on the call to action that you have on the button, that's what gives the button meaning. So if a button doesn't have a text, then it doesn't have a meaning, or maybe an icon, or it must have an element for it to represent that, okay, this is a button. So another thing another element that our button has to have, what, is an icon. So I'm going to import one of these icons here. I'll be using this, so I'll just click this and drag it over here and here. Let me align it here. Now, for those that are familiar with Figma, right, you should know that Figma has a feature called auto layout. Now, auto layout is a feature that allows you to work smarter, right, as a designer. So we're going to add auto layout to this. So there are different ways to add auto layout. For those that are familiar with it, you just have to click on what, Shift and A on a PC, and you get that started with. But let's assume that we don't know how to do that, right? Because this is a practical session for those that are also just getting started. So what I will do, I'm going to highlight this text and I'm going to right click. Now, right clicking, I have several options here, and I can see the auto layout option right here. I'll click on this. As you can see, a frame has been added as a container for this text property. So I have the text property inside, and auto layout has been added. Now, without auto layout, let me duplicate this button and do this and remove the auto layout. This is it here. This container, now I can move this button, this text around. You can see I can move it around. Okay, let me add a background so that it will give us contrast. I have my styles here. Let me add a background so that it will give a little bit of contrast. So if you can see this, you can see I can move my button around, right? But inside the auto layout container, I can't do that, right? Because the button is what is obeying its parent container. If you want to know more about auto layout, because you won't want to like dive deeper into auto layout, we'll be using some of its feature. We would have a session for that. We actually had a session for that last year, and the Figma file is actually live on the Figma community. So if you need that, a link will be dropped, and you can use that file to understand how to use auto layout. We'll also be having a class on advanced auto layout in our subsequent sessions. So stay tuned and get to learn about buttons. So back to our class. So I've added auto layout to this. A container has been added. Now I also want this icon, right, to be a part of our button. So I'm just going to click this and move it inside our auto layout container. You can see this. So let me rename this to button components, right? So these are button components. Let me delete this. You can see we're already building our button, right? So this text is 24. Let me leave it as 18, because as a designer you have to understand things like your typography skill, right? Very important. Your typography skill, you can write that down somewhere and get to read on typography skill. It's very important if you are working on a real life application. You want to have a typography skill that you use all through your designs, because all these elements, all these features, all these properties, right, helps you to be consistent and work smarter. They are very, very important. Back to our class. So we have our text, and also we have our icon here, right? The icon is also a component of its own. I mentioned that there are several types of components, right? If you were following, if you are just joining in, we have several types of components, right? So we have the icon, we have the button, we have the inputs, we also have checkbox, and we have a whole lot of components, but we'll just be using our icon and also the text that we have here. So we have this, so let's get into it. So now to add more context to our button, right, because I want to teach you guys the anatomy of button, right, how I actually create my own buttons. Now I'm going to group this. These are our main button container. I'm going to go inside here and what add another container. So I'm going to right click and add auto layout inside this container, right? So I have two auto layouts. So I'm going to name this as what, as the contents, and we have this as what, as our main button. So this is like what, nested what, layers, right? So the first layer that we have here is our button, which is this one. Now the child layer, that's this one, is content. So inside the contents also has its own child layer, which are what, are the text and also what, our icon. So that's how I create my own buttons, right? And I'll explain why I do that as we go further. Yeah, so let me add a bit of context to this using auto layout. So auto layout allowed us to what, to align several properties that we have in its inside its container, right? So this is the auto layout section here. I can align this to center. I can align this to, let me increase the size of this button, that's the width, so you guys can see what I can do with auto layout. You can see this. I can align this to the center. I can align this to the left. Okay, the reason it's not going is because I allowed it to be left, constraint to the left, right? Yeah, this should work. Oh, sorry, I actually increased the padding instead of increasing the actual container. So that's why I was like, whoa, what's happening here? So let me increase the size of the container instead. Yeah, that's that. So I want to explain how auto layout actually works. So center this, can you see it's centered? I can also center left. I can bring it to the bottom. If I increase this, just a little bit of context on how auto layout works. So you can just play around with this. You can use it to align your child elements, right? So basically, so let's get back to business. I'm going to click on Ctrl Z, and we have our button back. So now we have auto layout added to this. I want to center this first. Now the child layer, that's this here, is also what, auto layout has been added to it. So I want to also center that. Now Figma has a text property, right? A text feature that we can use, because now looking at this button, these buttons are not what, are not aligned to the center. It's looking like this one is at the top and this is at the bottom. I don't know if you have a good eye for visuals, right? You'll be able to understand that this is not centered properly. So if I click on this text, I'm going to go into what, the text settings. If you can see this here, now Figma has a new feature under what, this vertical trim. Can you see it's what, it's on standard, which is the normal one. It had a little bit of spacing because of our line height, right? Because of the line height that we have, it has a little bit of spacing at the top and the bottom. But we also have this feature which allows us to what, to trim that text. So let me click on that. Now our text what, is properly aligned with our button. Can you see that? It's properly what, aligned. Now this icon component, I'm going to reduce the size to what, to 20 pixels, so that we have a wonderful button, right? I think this button is actually good to go, but for now, but we can't start using this button because it's not yet a component, right? And let's just create a standard large button. This is how I create mine. So the padding, that's the inner padding here, right? Can you see the top and bottom padding? I allow it to be what, to be 16 pixels, and on the left and right I add 44 pixels. Now I'm using the 4-point grid system. You can also read on that, and we'll be having subsequent class on grid systems, right? I'm using the 4-point grid system, so it just means that most of the values I'm going to be using are going to be divisible by 4. So that's why I have 16 and I have like 44. So this is my first button so far, but I haven't added components, right? I've not made this button as a component. So if I duplicate this button right now, and let's say I change anything here, let's say I change this to do not disturb. Can you see nothing is happening here, right? It's like this is a separate entity on its own. Okay, so let's do what we came here to do, right? Let's make this button. I'll delete this one. let me make it a component. So how do we add components? How do we make an element a component? What you just need to do is to click on this button here. Can you see this icon here? That's the our component icon. So there are several ways to create a component. You can either right click and create components. Can you see it here? We also have that option here. So since Figma actually make the whole experience better, so there are several ways to perform a particular task. And as a designer, you have to be thinking in that way, right? How do I work smarter? How will my users consume this product? You have to be asking yourself that question. So I'm going to click on create components. I'll click on this and click on this button here to create a component. Can you see that something changed, right? The whole color of this button changed to show that a component, this button is actually a component. Yeah. Sorry, can you guys still hear me? Those in the chats, can you hear me? Okay, the explanation is going well. Okay, yes, that's awesome. Success. Thanks. Can others also hear me? Okay. That's amazing. Okay. So yeah, so this button is now a component. So we can just call this our button component, and I can actually use this button in every design right now. So let me duplicate it. I explained what an instance is, right? So I'm going to create an instance holding Alt key, just an easier way to do things, right? You can just Control C and Control V, Control C and Control V. That's duplicated. So this is an instance. Notice the difference between the main components and the instance that I created. In Figma now, Figma are making things so accessible to us, right? Making us to be able to differentiate between several features and also elements that have some different properties, right? So basically, you can look at this icon here. Can you see the component icon? You can see it here. You can, even if I zoom, it still remains at the same size, so it's not like it's very huge like that, but you should be able to see this. So this is the component icon. It shows that this is our main component. Now let's do something magical right now. Let me change the color of this button. Let's say I want to change it to this. Now, did you guys see what happened? Like, let me change it to another color that is not part of my style guide. Let me change it to like a green. Can you guys see? I'm just changing one single component, and it's actually changing all through the whole system. So even if I have 5 of this button, if I have more than 5 and I just change, let's say I change it to blue here, can you see? I'm just changing a single button, and it's actually it's overriding all the properties on the instance. So basically, using components are so awesome. This is not just limited to button, please. You can create components out of anything. The whole essence of this class is to give us an understanding of how I create my own button and also how components works. Please try to understand this. It's not that you can just only create a component out of a button. You can create a component out of any element on your design. So yeah. So back to our class. So I will just delete this. I don't want to have a whole lot of button. Now, so let me explain something. Now you might be thinking, okay, what if I want to change the instance, right? I want to change this instance. Anytime I change this, it actually affects the whole instances, right? But what if I want my instance to be different? Yeah, you can also do that in Figma. Figma gives you leverage to do that, right? So if I change the color of this instance, let's say I want to change this now to let's say my brand color. The contrast is too much, so I'll just reduce it a bit. Yeah, this is better for those. Okay, so you can see this. But anytime I now do this, if I change the color of this button right now, sorry, I don't like that contrast, because it's going to really, yeah, this is better. Nothing happens, right? It's like this is not changing. This is looking like it has been detached, but no, it wasn't detached, right? It means that what, anytime you you change the property of an instance, the main components would not be able to affect it. So there are some certain properties that you can change that it won't get overridden, right? Some of the examples are what are your text property. You have what, your colors. If I have an outline to this, let's say I add a blue outline to this, it's not on the main component, right? So it means that you can still style your instance. So Figma still gives you leverage to do that. So it's not like because I created this in a particular way with some necessary features, right? It doesn't mean that I can't override those properties. I can do that in Figma. So Figma is actually an amazing tool to use. I recommend Figma because that's the #1 leading tool right now. Most companies, most in this industry, right, in this product design industry, is essential for you to know how to use Figma, because if you can use Figma, you can use Sketch, you can use Adobe XD, right? But Figma is so awesome. I'm an advocate for Figma, by the way. So that's by the side. So now let's create our smart button, because all we have been doing is just creating a normal button, as I'll call it, right? This is just a basic button. There's no property added to this. This is just several instances of that button. So I'll delete this instance. Says okay, let me just move them to this, and I'll duplicate this and delete this too. So let me just swap between this, so I still have my main component. Hope you guys know the one that is in the main component right now. So this is my main components. I just swapped their position basically. So this is my main components. So now this is why we are here for today's class, right? This is one of the most important area of concentration. Very important. Component properties, right? So now from this main component, we have several properties that we can add to this component. Now let me click on this and add the first property. Let me add the second one, because I'm not creating variants here. Okay, let me create variants. Let's go with the first one. I type this. Now can you see I've added the first variant property. Let's say the type of variant I want to add is let's say state. Let's say state, right? Or let me say color. Let me just say color, and let me name this as blue. Yeah, color. So this is the first variant, right? That's the default one. Let me change this to blue. Now inside this component right now, I can still add other variants by clicking on this button. There are several ways to do it. You can also right click, come here. No, you right click on the main component, that's this one, and you come here and add variants, right? So you can do that, but let me just do it using this button here. So you can just click on this plus icon here, or this plus button. Now I've created another variant. Now let me change the color of this variant for you guys to understand how variant works. Let me use this color. Yeah, contrast is okay. So these are two separate buttons, right? Two separate buttons, but they are part of a singular component. This is the main component. These are several variants. So from what I defined variant as, right, variant allows you to group and organize similar components into a single container, right? So this is what we've just done. We have the main components here. This is it, and we have several variants inside this. Now this is a duplicate, or this is an instance, right, of this button. Now can you see another feature has been added here, right? If you can see this well, you can see I have my color property right now on this instance, so I can change the color to this. I can switch back to this just from a single click. Now with this, now you can use this to create a complete button library. right? Let me show you guys what a button library is. I have one here. Can you see this? So this is what a button library. So this button right now comprises of all the different states that I want to use, right? If I did not create this in a smart way, I'm going to have like almost 72 different variants or more than on this, but I created it the smart way, so that's why I just have some little number of buttons here, right? And also for the developer use, because developer will inspect your designs and want to be like, okay, how do I create my own button components on React, right, or on Vue, on several frameworks that the developer is working with. And you can just come here, okay, this is your enabled button or the active button, this is the hover state, this is your focus. Okay, the large button, this is the size, the medium size, this is it, the small button, this is the size. So you can see that this is amazing, right? And buttons are actually cool because they are one of the most basic components that we have in UI UX design. Sorry, can you guys still hear me? Okay, yeah, I'll go over auto layout again. Okay, awesome. Sorry, let me just take water. Okay. Okay, back to class. So now we have this. As you can see, I've created several variants, right, of this. Now another property that we can add here is our boolean property, right? Our boolean property. Now if showing this to you, this is this, right? Can you see that I don't have my icon? It's like the icon is hidden somewhere. But if I duplicate this button, that's this is a part of my design system, right? If I duplicate this button, I've added all the necessary styles here. If you can see this, I can just toggle between this and, sorry, let me change that style so that we get to see that better. Can you see this? I can toggle off and on, and we have this. So this is what the boolean property. So let's do the same thing here. So we have a single icon here. Now this button allows you to select any matching layers, right? So we have matching layers, so I'll select these two icons and come to this property, the design panel here, and we have the layer section here. Can you see this layer section? If I click on this button here, can you see it's written there, create boolean property. Now I want to create a boolean property inside this main component, so I'll click on this and I'm going to name it show left icon. Now let's leave the value as true, or as true, yes. Now the value is true right now, right? Now on this button, can you see on the instance that we have here, another property has been added, right? Can you see it here? The initial one we have was our color. Now we have, that's the color variant, right? Now we have a boolean property. Now look at it, it has a toggle button, right? So let's see what this does. Wow, can you see that the button is nowhere to be found, the icon is nowhere to be found? Let's bring the icon back. Like this is amazing. Like I love Figma. Can you see this? Just it's a single click, I can do all this. There's something wrong with my button, it keeps going up and down. Well, let me fix that. Center, and you should also be centered. Okay, auto layout has been removed. I noticed that. Let me add auto layout back here, and yeah, okay, we're good to go. So let me try that again. Okay, you can see that. Now there's a little trick to this, right? Because in terms of creating a visually appealing button, your icon must have a particular size. But if you notice, as I am toggling off and on this boolean property, that's the icon, the size of the button keeps reducing. And that's why I did this before creating my button, right? I added a container inside my button while structuring my button, right? I added a container inside this layers that we have here, right? I grouped this inside a container. So we have this and this. So now I'm going to give this size, this container, a fixed size, and the fixed size is going to be what? 20 pixels. So let me just do that. 20 what? Pixels. Now let's see if this is going to fix our problem of our button resizing and what's reducing the size of our button. Let me do this. Can you see this actually is still misbehaving, right? Why is that happening? It's because I only made the update on a single variant here, right? So let's change this to check if it's going to work on the variants that we updated. So this is the blue variant. Now let me toggle off and on. Can you see this? Off, on. Now the height of our button is not shaky anymore, right? Is an actual size. If I change it back to the other variant, that's the purple variant, can you see this size? It's misbehaving. It's like, what's happening here? This won't work if you are creating a robust system. But if I have this, it works, right? So let's make the same changes here too, and change this to what? To fixed. For those that are familiar with auto layout, change this to fixed, and we have 20 pixels right there. So now if I change this, can you see this? And it works all through. Just with a singular button, I can toggle off and on my button. Now another feature, right, another property that components have is the text property, as I explained here, right? I explained that we have what? The text property. Yeah, the text property, right? So let's go to the text property. Now this is our text, so we want to add the text property here. So you scroll down on the design panel. Can you see where we have contents? This is another section here, right, where you have the name of the button. From here you can change this button to let's do it. Can you see this? From here you can change the value of the button, but what I want to do is to add a text property. So you can see if I hover on this icon here, it says what? Create what? Text property. That's the tooltip is saying that what? Create text property. So this is the dialog box for us to create a text property. So let's name this what? Sorry, let me do this. Hold on a minute. Let's name this as what? As our text property. I'm going to select matching layers. That's, I want to make the whole of this a text property, and I'll tell you why I'm doing this. So I do this. Let's name this as, the name of the property is what? Is label, and the value is what? Is button. Now let's go to this instance right now. The instance we have here, this is our instance. So this is what we'll be using all through our designs. Maybe when you have login, sign up. Can you see another property has been added here? If you can see this, another property has been added. So let's change the text name right now. The call to action, let's change this to let's do it, or let's change it to what? To buy now. Can you see? It's very easy. Now I don't need to start clicking inside this button. Let me change this to the blue one. So you see that I don't need to start clicking inside this button. That for me to change this text property right now, or the text element, I don't need to be clicking inside all these layers. Imagine I have let's say a design like this, right? Something like this. We're going to make a prototype out of this. I have something like this, and I want to select just this button. Now let's say this button is inside a lot of layers. It's really time consuming, right? But with this right now, with this button, I can just click on the button, and I can, from my design panel right now, I can change the value of my of my text property to buy what? Buy now. Can you see that? Okay, buy now, sorry. Buy now. Or I can change it back to what? To button. Or I can change it to what? To sign up. Or I can change it to what? To create account. Can you see this? And our button is what? Is so smart, it's so responsive, right? It keeps what? Increasing horizontally, and the size vertically is what? Is so perfect. Now this is just a single button, right? Now let's do another thing. Let's go to the next one. That's our swap instance property. Now, how do we add that? We can add that in a button. You have to understand how your button is being built, right? Which properties goes where, which properties can do we want to swap, right? Now, we want to be able to change this icon right now, this icon here, because while using a button, you might want to change this icon to a different type of icon. You might maybe want to change it to a search. You might want to change it to let's say we want to change it to this icon right now. This is our add icon that we have here, or the plus icon. It won't work, right? If we want to do this, we have to go inside this button here and let's say change it from here, right? Let's say we have plus and we change it this way, but that's not what I want to do. I don't want to achieve that. What I want to do is that anytime I click on this button, I should have all the properties listed here and I should be able to update them. So now, which brings us towards our instance swap property. Now, on this icon, you can see we have where we can change the different types of icon here, right? Let's say I want to change it to this. I can change it to this. I can change it to let's change it back to the initial one. I can change it to as much as possible. So let's leave it at this. Now we have this icon again. Anytime you see this icon, just know that it means to create a property. Now, hovering on this, can you see what the tooltip is telling us? Say that create instance swap. So let's do that. Instance swap. So let's name this to swap, or let's change it to left or right icon. Let's name it as right icon. Now it has other features here. Now these features allows you to add the preferred value. We'll come to this later, or let's just do it now. Adding a preferred value means that if you want to switch between a certain variety of icon, let's say the icons that you want to be changeable, right, are just your left arrow icon, or let's say your right arrow icon, and also your add icon. So basically you can add those icons here, so it will be easier for you to access them. Figma is just trying to build their platform around accessibility. It's very, very important for us to note that. So let's add some icons here that we can change, and let's create that. Now let's go back to our instance that has been created. Can you see we have this here right now? Just clicking on the button, I can switch between this, and I have this right now. Before now, what I do right before I understand how to use the instance swap, I have to click on this button and come here and start typing the type of button I want, right? Let's say I want a plus icon. Let's say I want the search icon. Let's change this to all instance. I want the search icon. I have to start changing it from here. You might be wondering where all these icons are coming from. I actually have my icon components here. I have a lot of them, as you can see them here. So I have an icon library here. If you want this icon, you can just duplicate it on the Figma file. It's iconly pack, so you can search that. I'll add that on the side notes for you guys to download. So yeah, so you can see that all these properties allows us to work smarter, right? It allows you to create a seamless button. So our time is fast spent. Our time is fast spent. Okay, this is just it. We still have 25 minutes because it's a 1 hour 30 minutes class. So let's take a quick break. So far, are you guys following? Can you guys hear me? Or I've been speaking to myself all along? I need response in the chat. Awesome. I think success is the most responsive member here. We also have Naftali. Okay, missing somewhere. Okay, don't worry, just you will have time for question and answer. Okay, we are following. I am following. Abubakar Akinade, thanks for joining. Okay, I actually love water, right? I take a lot of water. So let's go back to our class. So we've created a smart button with a lot of properties, right? I can toggle off and on all these properties. Even if you want to add the boolean property, right, to your text, you can do that. And how do you do that? Where you have this layer, so the boolean property affects what the layer elements, right? That it affects the layer. That's where you can add what you can add a boolean property on a layer, right? So you see this, I can add let's say show or hide button, hide label, and let's see the value as true. So if I click on this, can you see another property has been added, hide label. So if I click on this, now there is nothing on my button, right? This is an empty button. I can this is an empty button, as I said. Can you see we can bring back our label? So using properties in Figma is actually awesome, and using them for what to create buttons are so nice. So I urge you to always learn to do things the smart way. Don't just be creating buttons. There are some people that they still create buttons with rectangles, right? I'm not saying it's wrong. You can do that. I can also do that. I can create a button with rectangles, but this button won't be a smart one. I can't add all these properties on this button, right? It's possible to do that, but it's smarter to work with frames when you are designing. It's smarter to work with frames. So all through your designs, I don't want to be seeing rectangles except you are designing like an illustration or yeah, basically an illustration, right? But if you are working with sections, try to always use frames in Figma. Figma recommend frames over just grouping or using rectangles all through your design. So frames are what you should use. So our next topic of discussion is what is state, right? Because we want to allow this button to have several variants. So let me create several variants from this button. I'll duplicate it 4 times. Let me delete this one, and I'm going to delete. You can also delete a property in case you need that. You can delete it just by clicking here. Can you see that property has been removed? So on this variant, this first variant, I'm going to name this as as state. That's the name of the variant. So state has been added all through. Now this first one is going to be our active button, the active state of your button. Now looking at this design right now, this will help us to understand right better. Now you have a login screen. This is the first login screen, right? The user has not imputed anything, right? So you don't want this button to be clickable. You want this button to be disabled. That's the first another state of that button. You want this button to be disabled. Now you want when the user type in their name, their email, and also their password, right? You want the button to be enabled. Now after they click on this button, you want this to be a loader, right? You want this loader icon to appear, and you want this to load, and after some time you want it to load to this home page right here. You want this to load to this dashboard. So that's what we are trying to build. So I have the first one is my active state. You can also have an hover state. The next one is my hover or press state. The hover and the press state are two different things, but I like designing my button library, right, or my button components to have similar properties. That's the hover and the press state to have similar properties. Or we can also have the press states as an independent property. Let's have the hover. Let's just say hover property. Now this is going to be our disabled button, and this is going to be our pressed state. So these are the different state of button. These are the major different state of button. We have this is our active, this is our hover, this is our, but all of them are looking similar, right? So yeah, it doesn't really make so much sense. So let's give this a little bit of context by changing the property of each, right? We want this to be our hover. So the hover state of this, let me use from my text styles here. let's say I want it to be this primary 300, or let me use primary 400. Yeah, okay, let me make this to be 500. That's my primary button, that's the active state. So this is my hover state. When I hover on the button, I want it to navigate to this shade. Now the next one is what is our disabled button. Let me use maybe this. I don't want this, so what I will do is to just reduce the opacity of this button. Let's reduce the opacity to 50. That's from the layer panel here. I'm going to type 50. An easier way to do this, right, is to just press 5 on your keyboard. If I press 5 on my keyboard, you can see the opacity is set to 50. If you want to make the this to be what 100% again, opacity and transparency are the same thing. For those that are finding it difficult to understand what it is, right, opacity or you want to make it more transparent, that's what I'm talking about basically. So if you want to make it to be 100%, just click on 0 twice. You have to learn how to do things smartly, but very, very important. So I click on 5. I want this to be what, to be transparent by 50%, and I want this to be my press state. So if you've used a platform before, the press states most times used to have an outline. So I'll have an outline here, let's say an outline. Let's make this to be 2 pixels, and to beautify our buttons, right, you can add a little bit of border radius here. So let's add a corner radius. It's also referred to as border radius or corner radius. So let's add it, let's add like 8 pixels. Can you see this is rounded? So this is what is referred to as what, the corner radius or the border radius. Let me make it to be 4, since I'm using a 4-point grid system. Now I've updated this. Now this is our active button. We have this our hover state. We have this our disabled button, and we have this as well as the press state. Now we need one more button, which is going to be what, the loading button, right? So we have this as the loading button. Now I'm going to change this icon, detach this what, I want to detach what, the property. You can detach a property and make this property to be what, I want to detach this also. I want to change this to what, to a loader. So I have a loader icon that has been designed. This is it. I actually designed this using interactive components. We would have a class on that, a separate class on interactive components, so you get to know how to create amazing things, right, using components. So you understand this when I play the prototype. So we have this. So on this button, I don't want it to have okay, let's leave the label, since we can toggle off and off on the label. Now I want this to have the icon layer, that's show left. I want this to be added. Now we have this single button. This is our variant, right? This is our instance of this button. Another way to let me delete this, so it won't be like I've been using this. There's other ways to do things, right? Come to your assets panel. This is where all your components will be living. You can just click and what, and drag, right? You can just click and drag, and we have what, this similar button. If I want to go to the main component, I right click, go to main component. This is the main component, as you can see, right? So this is our what, our button. Now on this button we have what, the state has been added. We have what, the show left icon has been added. We have what, the label. We have what, the right icon. How do I name this right icon? I think I made mistake with my spelling. I can update that. Show left icon, I can update this here. It should be show right icon. Right icon. So it's going to update all through here. Yeah, show right icon. And we have our smart button created. Now this has what, different states, right? I can change from what, from the active state to the hover state. Can you see? To the what, to the disabled state. Can you see this? Down to what, to the loading state. Can you see this, right? On the loading states, I don't want to have an outline. I want it to be just this way. Now I'm going to use this button. Are you guys with me? Can you guys hear me? Hope this class is being recorded. Yeah, I'm recording the class and we're going to upload it on our YouTube channel. Yeah. Okay. So we have this button, right? This is the button we want to use all through this platform that we built, right? We want to use what? this button all through. If you are wondering that what's this platform about, this is actually a charity app that I designed around last year. So I'm just using the login screens to explain how the buttons work. So now I will use this button in each of this frame right now. So I have this. Let me go back to my layer panel. So if you can see this, can you see how I create my designs, right? I name all my designs. So this is the inactive state of the login screen, this is the active state, this is my loading state, and this is my actual dashboard. I name them. Learn to name all your components. It's very, very important. It allows you to structure your designs well, right? So let's go into this panel. I'll copy this, Control C, and inside this, right, I'll paste my button inside. Let me Control V8, and I'm going to delete this button right now. Now, since auto layout has been added, that's why it's important for you to create a button using auto layout. I can just come to this constraint property, that's the resizing property here. It's hog. I can make this to be what? Fill container. Can you see this? Now we have this. Now this should the text on this should be what should be log in, right? And this is what the inactive state. So the inactive state should have what? The disabled button on it. Can you see this? And do we want an icon? Let's remove the icon. Yeah, I don't need an icon here. Can you see this? This is the first button. Now on this same one, the second one, we are done with this. We have the disabled button here. Now we'll go to the next one and paste it here. I copied and paste. I'm going to delete this one, right? And here, this is what the active state, right? So we are going to use what? The active button, right? Can you see this? The active button has been added. Now I'm going to copy this and paste this on the third one and delete this one. Now what will this be? This will be our loading button. Now the loading button is still showing this text. Why? Because we have hide the icon, right? So let's show our loading icon and hide this. Can you see we have all our states being designed. Now I'm going to go to my prototype and link all this now. So this is how I prototype my this is not part of this class, but a very quick tip. So let me add this to the flow. Let me name this as my SR, right? That's the flow name. Now I have this text, right? So how do you think, how will this user interact? The user is going to click on this first component, right? That's the text input component, and link this, right, to this button. You want this whenever the user clicks on this, you want it to come to this button. If the user also clicks on the password, you also want it to come to this next frame, right? Now we are done with this. But if the user clicks on this, you don't want anything to happen because this is deactivated, right? Now on this next screen, everything has been set, it has been typed. If you want to create more interactive components, right, learn how to use ProtoPie. With ProtoPie, ProtoPie is the best prototyping tool out there, and I can say that I'm a master of ProtoPie. I actually use ProtoPie now for most of my prototypes, and it's actually amazing. It allows you to even type in your inputs, right? But on this now, we have this. So this has been set. Now on this button right now, we want, when we click this button, we want it to go to hover state, right? And the next thing is what's on this layer, that's on this one, on our loading container, that's this loading screen. We want it to have a particular interactive details, that's here. We want it to have after delay. I'll explain this later, after delay and the likes. So let me just play this prototype and let's see how our button behaves, right? Let that load. I hope yeah, network is good. While that is loading, do anyone have any other question? Yeah, the session is being recorded, so we'll have the recording out. It's being recorded, yeah. While that looks okay, it has loaded. Okay, it's not looking like let me just change this. I want our show prototype. I want this to be inside an iPhone, so I mostly use the iPhone 13 mini for my prototypes. So let me go back to the prototyping mode. Yeah, an iPhone should be showing right on my screen. It's zoomed in. Let me zoom out. Okay, yeah, so we have this to give a little bit of contrast, right? Let me change the background. Sorry, let me change the background color to maybe this, so that to give a little bit of contrast to those that want to see it well. Let me just change it to white. Basically, I don't know, I really prefer this. Okay, I don't know, I'm just so crazy about dark mode basically, so I'll leave it at my dark mode. Let's make it do with my dark mode. So now this is the prototype that I just created. So if I click on this, can you see the button changes? Now let's click on this one. Wow, can you guys see how what's happening? Let me reload this prototype and press this for you to see it well. The first thing a user comes is clicks on this input. Everything has been generated. Now nothing else is active, right? So I click on this. That's the active state of the button. This is our loading state. That should load. Okay, let me give it more context, right? I would increase the delay time here to 2000, and let's refresh this. Click on this, and it loads, and we have this. So finally we have seen how our button is functioning, right? We just need to use just one single instance. I don't need to start creating an if I want to edit the whole color of this button right now on this interface, right, on this screen that I created, the only thing I need to go is to come to this. I can change the color. Let me say I want to use this gradient that I used here, right? I'll copy these gradients, Ctrl C, and I'll paste it here. Let's say I paste it here. Now let's check this out. What happens to our active button? Can you see this? Now let's say I want to have rounded corners all through. Let me type 50 pixels. Sorry, on where we have corner radius, 50 pixels. Can you see that it keeps on updating? The only thing I need to change right now is just this component, and we are good to go. Now if you want to build a more robust system, because our time is fast spent, we won't want to go deeper into that. If you want to build a more robust system, I would share the slide. The slide is going to help you to understand how to create components, and also how to create this type of button property. Now let me just show you guys a little bit of something, right? These buttons are so many, but in the real sense, I'm going to run a plugin called what's the name of that plugin again? It starts with a P. Yeah, the prop star plugin. I'm going to run this plugin just to show you guys something. The prop star plugin, that's one of my favorite plugins for design systems. So you guys know the amount of buttons and the different amount of variants that have been created. I'm going to click on this and wait for it to load. It's loading on the background. I'm waiting for it to create the amount of buttons that I have. I think I have my Photoshop opened on my other windows, and also my Adobe Illustrator. Let me see. Was that created? Yeah. This is what I'm looking for here. Sorry, just give me a minute. Let me take all this out. Okay, and paste it here. Now this is the total amount of variants, right, that I have. Can you see if I'm to create the whole of this button right now without using let me add a background color so you can see this better. Let me add a background color. Well, you should be able to see this. Can you see the amount of button I have here? This is the amount of variants that have been created. If I was to create them one by one, right, this is the amount of variants that I have in my design system, and this is going to be crazy for me to keep on creating this one by one. Now let's check our button that we created right now. That's this button. Let me right click, let me change this back to primary 500 and run the plugin I just run. Come to my plugin here and create the table. Now let's see how many that we have. Can you see this? We have more than